We have some important updates on Jamal Khashoggi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, although I mess it up every other day. He's, of course, the Saudi journalist killed by Saudi Arabia. We also have some loathsome responses to share with you, but first, let's go to The Hill. They report the following. An individual suspected of being part of the group of Saudis involved in the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi was reportedly seen around Istanbul wearing Khashoggi's clothes, a fake beard, and glasses on the day of the killing. CNN, citing a senior Turkish official, reported that the man in the video, identified as Mustafa al-Madani, was captured by surveillance cameras leaving the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on the day Khashoggi died there. He appears to be wearing the same clothes Khashoggi was seen wearing when he entered the consulate. Turkish investigators have said they have audio and other evidence that proves Khashoggi was killed and dismembered by a group of Saudis in the consulate. The Turkish official told CNN that al-Madani was used as a body double in the operation. So what we're looking at here is, and this really, really struck me, that it's so concerted and so organized and so planned that it really seems like a smoke-filled back room in a way. And I always try to avoid the smoke-filled back room conspiracies whenever possible, but this is one of those instances where you're like, the dude wore a fake beard. I mean, that is wild. So Trump is waffling on this, and he's saying, I would love it if MBS didn't do it. And he's basically, trying to play both sides and pretend like he's tough on crime, but at the same time trying to keep the U.S.-Saudi alliance intact. And yeah, it's just a mess. So explain why it is that they would use the body double. Was it the Saudis' attempts to make it seem as though Khashoggi had left the consulate? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's right.
Yeah. So two natural conclusions come out of that, right? One part is surprising though. So the natural conclusions are, if you bring a bone saw and an autopsy expert and a body double, it wasn't something that happened by accident.
Right.
Over. End of this. It's not even close. That's super obvious. If the bone saw for some insane reason did not convince you, because you watch Fox News or something, well, the body double's got to do it, doesn't it? I mean, who brings a body double to an accidental killing? I don't think that's a thing. So, second conclusion, which actually haunts me in some ways more, is I don't think they could have possibly have known what Khashoggi was going to wear that day.
Exactly.
And so I believe that is Khashoggi's actual clothes.
Yeah.
I think they took it off of him before they killed him because they obviously doesn't have blood on him. And remember, they likely chopped off his fingers while he was still alive. So likely they stripped him naked, tortured him, and it's all on audio apparently. So the Turkish government has that. They keep threatening to use it and release it. In fact, they say they're going to release it tomorrow. So we'll see. And so naked, tortured, parts of his body chopped off, and then killed, and then beheaded and dismembered. We believe, but we're not positive about the order. We don't know if they beheaded him to kill him. So anyone trying to say that this was not premeditated is an obvious liar. Well, thankfully, the moral voice of our generation, Pat Robertson, has some thoughts on this for us. So let's take a look at that.
I'll say it now and I'll say it over and over again. We've got to cool the rhetoric. And what the president is trying to do is to give the Saudis an out, and calls for sanctions and calls for punitive action against the Saudis is ill-advised. And Wendy, I just don't think you've got $100 billion worth of arms sales, which is, that's one of those things. But more than that, we've got to have some Arab allies. We have to have it. We cannot alienate our biggest player in the Middle East, who's a bulwark against Iran.
But can we have somebody that's killing journalists that are U.S. residents is the question.
We've had so many people killed. I mean, we had CIA people killed in Lebanon. People have been taken hostage over the years. I know it's bad, but I mean, we've had all kinds of stuff. But you don't blow up an international alliance over one person. I mean, I'm sorry.
Oh, what a great Christian. I wonder what his thoughts are on reproductive rights, right? When it comes to zygotes, I'm sure he's very much concerned about, being pro-life. But when it comes to living, breathing human beings who happen to be journalists who get murdered, well, these things happen. What are you gonna do? I mean, there were some CIA people sometime in the past.
That's a great point, Anna, and I hadn't thought about it in that context. Imagine if the Saudis had committed an abortion on purpose. Would Pat Robertson see it completely differently? Wait a minute, I didn't know the Saudis were that terrible. They're killing what they would consider to be people before they're born. After they're born, dismembering them and beheading them is perfectly fine if you got an arms deal at stake. But before they're born, that's an outrage. Before they're an actual person, oh my God, we got to protect them. I don't know, but there actually is no bounds to Robertson's hypocrisy. So he might even say, oh, they did an abortion. What's one abortion when we got an arms deal? I mean, look, imagine if he applied that logic back in the day to the guy who started his religion. Like, I mean, we got to deal with the Roman Empire. What's one guy compared to a gigantic deal we have with the biggest empire in the world? I mean, this one little guy from Nazareth, what does he matter?
I liked how he ignores all of the parts of the Bible that are just pacifist, and this really shows that he puts political ideology above everything else. And it shows that he'll fall in line behind Donald Trump come hell or high water, because he actually views him kind of as his demigod more than he views the words of his own Lord and Savior. So I find it's just strange to me that you can have Christians who are really good people, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., for example, who use the message of the Bible for all the right reasons. But then you could also get the polar opposite philosophy to the point where it's comical.
I don't even think Pat Robertson is trying to preach anything from the Bible anymore. I mean, after Trump got elected, you're right, he does see Trump as this God figure. In fact, he thinks that Donald Trump was chosen by God to be president. He has now become, another propaganda arm of the Trump administration in addition to Fox News. So Jake, just to answer the question of whether or not he would be upset if the Saudis had forced an abortion, I don't think he would be upset, because I do think that politics go above anything else, including his so-called religious beliefs. But Pat Robertson actually doubled down after getting criticized for this, and he used the same talking point that Trump uses, which is, no, but you guys don't understand, the Saudi arms deal is important because of jobs. Okay, that is a lie. And I wanted to look into that claim and actually give you guys some of the numbers. So first off, how many jobs does the US defense industry employ? About 355,000. So Trump claims, oh no, this specific Saudi arms deal has led to 500,000 jobs.
Oh, come on.
I know, 500,000 jobs. But the funny thing is, in typical Trump fashion, he keeps changing the numbers to suit whatever point he's trying to make. So back in January of this year, when MBS was visiting in Washington, Trump had claimed that this Saudi arms deal was going to provide about 40,000 new jobs. Fast forward to today with this whole Khashoggi controversy, all of a sudden, just to justify selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, he's now saying 500,000. There have been some cases where he's said 600,000. So how many jobs is it? It's certainly not 600,000, not 500,000. And again, just to emphasize or re-emphasize, the US defense industry employs 355,500 jobs.
For the entire industry.
Exactly.
And by the way, he said on now dozens of occasions, it's a $100 billion deal, it's a $110 billion deal. It's 14.5 billion. I mean, you could say 14.5 billion, that's still a lot of money, right? No, but he's got to embellish. He has to embellish on the numbers, on the jobs, and the amount of money that would come in. And the Pat Robertsons of the world, of course, unquestioningly have his back. I was also amused that they had prosperity gospel preacher Paula White on in a different situation in Pat Robertson's channel, talking about how, well, if you look at the Bible, it appears that Jesus is an immigrant. But he's not. He's not. He never broke any of the laws, okay? And did he have documents? I'm pretty sure he was undocumented, right?
He's also brown, by the way, which, I don't think they're very comfortable with that fact.
Right.
If he existed at all, I should say, he's brown. That's the region of the world he's from.
That's right. They twist everything to try to fit their political agenda, and their political agenda has nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Now, speaking of political agenda, I have one more video for you. I think you're gonna like this. Rush Limbaugh also weighed in on this. Take a look.
I continue to get emails about the so-called Washington Post journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. My question is a really rather simple one. Where was this concern for our ambassador and 3 other men brutally murdered in Benghazi? And Hillary Clinton's reaction, what difference does it make now? She said in frustration. Does anybody see a disparity here in proportion?
Where was this concern? Everywhere. I don't know about you guys, but I saw Benghazi absolutely everywhere. And it's weird because he's saying this in service of the point, okay, let's ignore the Khashoggi thing because let's not go after Donald Trump.
Yeah, so we had about 28 hearings on Benghazi, so that's one of your answers. Second of all, there was no arms deal or other relationship we had to the people who did the killings in Benghazi. If there was, we all would have been massively in favor of cutting off that arms deal. Exactly. They killed our ambassador. They killed 3 other people. That's terrible. Does anybody think we had a relationship with those guys? No, the made-up charges the Republicans said at the time is that somehow the Democrats should have known about the attack and the terrorist intentions ahead of time, and then afterwards should have said other words about it. But no one claims that we had a secret deal with the people who did the killings. In this case, we have a giant deal that Donald Trump won't shut up about with the guys who did the killings. That's a massive difference. Of course, you have to assume if you're Rush Limbaugh that your audience is not that bright, so you'll be able to skate that by them, including the incredibly obnoxious beginning to that so-called Washington Post journalist. What's the so-called part of it? He wrote for the Washington Post. He was a columnist for them for a year. And now you just want to smear the guy in every imaginable way.
And I honestly don't care who or what he was anyway.
Exactly.
He was dismembered by the Saudi government, which seems to be the big point there.
So, and now finally, let's go to that issue, right? So these same guys, Pat Robertson, Rush Limbaugh, Donald Trump, are the ones who told you the Muslims are the problem. We got to keep him out of the country until we figure out what the hell is going on.
That's a good point.
And I mean, Rush Limbaugh, how many segments did he do about the evil Muslims? Now, I would add fundamentalist Muslims, but that's a distinction we make. That's not even a distinction Rush Limbaugh or Pat Robertson makes, or Donald Trump. But I mean, if you want to talk about evil fundamentalist Muslims, it doesn't get any more so than the Saudi leadership. And so not only was that the case before this killing, but now Pat Robertson and Rush Limbaugh are defending the most extremist Islamic fundamentalist that just beheaded and dismembered someone. Get a load of that twisted logic. And a lot of their followers are like, well, of course we're pro-Muslim beheadings. Haven't we said that all along?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. And I think that this whole story further proves that the right wing only uses Muslims for the sole purpose of fear-mongering, that they themselves know that the general Muslim population doesn't really serve as a threat to the United States, doesn't serve as a national security threat to the United States. What they do is exploit people's fear to win elections, to spread propaganda, to pass anti-immigration legislation or at least anti-immigration initiatives. And so if they were really concerned about the damage that Muslims would do, they would be outraged by this. But at the end of the day, it's all about the money, it's all about protecting political interests, it's all about covering up for Trump, helping Trump cover up for the Saudis. I mean, it's a really disgusting story, especially when you consider the precedent it sets for journalists, period. I mean, this says, hey, if you're a journalist, the US government will not look out for you and will not, try to get justice on your behalf if you get murdered by Saudi royals or any other government, especially if there's a financial interest to keep those ties.
Yeah, it's any government that we profit off of.
Right.
And in the case of Donald Trump, he actually has made this clear on several occasions, to your point about Muslims in general. He said, the Saudis, why would I be opposed to the Saudis? They pay me $40 to $50 million per apartment. Of course I'm not going to be opposed to the Saudis. He literally said that. And if you don't know this, not only the Saudis switch, as soon as Donald Trump won the presidency, switch all their hotel rooms from other hotels, all to Trump properties. I mean, this bribery is not veiled very much. I know the Saudis are into veiling, but apparently not that. But in some cases, they literally took out hotel rooms, giant blocks of hotel rooms in Trump hotels, and never went. They're just bribes. It's bribes out in the open. And Trump says, why would I be opposed to the Saudis? They keep paying me. Of course I'm not opposed to the Saudis. oh, it's non-rich Muslims that I'd like to fearmonger about, while I actually have the worst of fundamentalist Muslims that pay me money, so I like them. In fact, in this case, he said, nobody's told me he's responsible, referring to the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, or as I'm calling him now, Bonso Salman. He said, nobody's told me he's not responsible. We haven't reached that point. I would love if he wasn't responsible.
Yep.
I would love if he wasn't responsible. Now, finally, the thing that they're a little agitated about is that the Saudis bungled lying so badly that it's hard to cover up for them. They're dying to cover up for them, but they made it really hard. One, to the question I raised originally, if you had the body double, why didn't you use it as an alibi? Like, I don't know why they did the body double, and then they didn't use it. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, as soon as it happened, they're like, oh, that was a really bad idea. He's got an obviously fake beard. They immediately identified who he is, right? So I guess scrap that plan. And in the beginning, of course, they said, no, he walked out alive. And the Saudi officials said that, saying, no, we know for sure he walked out alive. Now, when they asked Donald Trump, even he had a tough time justifying that. He had to tell the Washington Post, yeah, that one was inconsistent.
You know why they bungled it and why they didn't use the body double? Because the Turks were eavesdropping on the whole situation. Like, they had bugged the room, and they have, based on what we know, and I am taking it at face value, they say they have the audio recordings of the whole, murder, basically.
And other evidence.
And
they're going to release it tomorrow.
So if I were, with the Saudis, if I were Saudi royalty and I knew all about all this, I wouldn't go to the body double, because the body double doesn't matter. It's clear that it's a body double if the Turks have the evidence that they say they have.
Yeah. Now we know not only do they not care about the genocide happening in Yemen with our weapons, they also don't care about dead journalists.
Exactly.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.